And God stepped out on space, and he looked around and said,
I'm lonely. I'll make me a world.
And far as the eye of God could see, darkness covered everything, blacker than 100 midnights down in a cypress swamp. Then God smiled, and the light broke, and the darkness rolled up on one side, and the light stood shining on the other. And God said,
That's good.
Then God reached out and took the light in his hands, and God rolled the light around in his hands until he made the sun. And he set that sun a-blazing in the heavens. And the light that was left from making the sun, God gathered it up in a shining ball and flung it against the darkness, spangling the night with the moon and stars. He hurled the world, and God said,
That's good.
Then God himself stepped down, and the sun was on his hand, and the moon was on his left. The stars were clustered about his head, and the earth was under his feet. And God walked, and where he trod, his footsteps hollowed the valleys out and bulged the mountains up. Then he stopped and looked and saw that the earth was hot and barren. So God stepped over to the edge of the world, and he spat out the 7 seas. He batted his eyes, and the lightnings flashed. He clapped his hands, and the thunders rolled. And the waters above the earth came down. The cooling waters came down. Then the green grass sprouted, and the little red flowers blossomed. The pine tree pointed his finger to the sky, and the oak spread out his arms. The lakes cuddled down in the hollows of the ground, and the rivers ran down to the sea. And God smiled again, and the rainbow appeared and curled itself around his shoulder. Then God raised his arm, and he waved his hand over the sea and over the land, and he said,
Bring forth, bring forth.
And quicker than God could drop his hand, fishes and fowls and beasts and birds swam the rivers and the seas, roamed the forests and the woods, and split the air with their wings. And God said,
That's good.
Then God walked around, and God looked around on all that he had made. He looked at the sun, and he looked at his moon, and he looked at his little stars. He looked on his world with all its living things. And God said,
I'm lonely still.
Then God sat down on the side of a hill where he could think. By a deep, wide river he sat down, with his head in his hands. God thought and thought, till he thought,
I'll make me a man.
Up from the bed of the river, God scooped the clay, and by the bank of the river he kneeled him down. And there the great God Almighty, who lit the sun and fixed it in the sky, who flung the stars to the most far corner of the night, who rounded the earth in the middle of his hand, this great God, like a mammy bending over her baby, kneeled down in the dust, toiling over a lump of clay, till he shaped it in his own image. Then into it he blew the breath of life, and man became a living soul. Amen. Amen.
From the south with a honeyed mouth, a Glory be to God for dappled things, for skies of couple colour as a brinded cow, for rose moles all in stipple upon trout that swim, fresh fire-coal chestnut falls, finches' wings, landscape plotted and pieced, fold, fallow and plough, and all trades, their gear and tackle trim. All things counter, original, spare, strange, whatever is fickled, freckled, who knows how, with swift, slow, sweet, sour, a dazzle dim. He fathers forth whose beauty is past change. Praise him.
When God had finished the stars and whirl of coloured suns, he turned his mind from big things to fashion little ones. Beautiful tiny things like daisies he made, and then he made the comical ones in case the minds of men should stiffen and become dull, humourless and glum, and so forgetful of their Maker be as to take even themselves quite seriously. Caterpillars and cats are lively and excellent puns. All God's jokes are good, even the practical ones. And as for the duck, I think God must have smiled a bit, seeing those bright eyes blink on the day he fashioned it. And he's probably laughing still at the sound that came from out of its bill.
If ever I saw blessing in the air, I see it now, in this still early day, where lemon green the vaporous morning drips wet sunlight on the powder of my eye. Blown bubble film of blue, the sky wraps round weeds of warm light, whose every root and rod splutters with soapy green, and all the world sweats with the bead of summer in its bud. If ever I heard blessing, it is there where birds in trees that shoals and shadows are splash with their hidden wings, and drops of sound break on my ears their crests of throbbing air. Pure in the haze, the emerald sun dilates, the lips of sparrows milk the mossy stones, while white as water by the lake, a girl swims her green hand among the gathered swans. Now, as the almond burns its smoking wick, dropping small flames to light the candled grass. Now, as my low blood scales its second chance, if ever world were blessed, now it is.
Nothing is so beautiful as spring, when weeds in wheels shoot long and lovely and lush. Thrush's eggs look little low heavens, and thrush through the echoing timber does so rinse and ring the ear, it strikes like lightnings to hear him sing. The glassy pear tree leaves and blooms, they brush the descending blue. That blue is all in a rush with richness. The racing lambs, too, have fair their fling. What is all this juice and all this joy? A strain of the earth's sweet being in the beginning in Eden garden. Have, get, before it cloy, before it cloud, Christ, Lord, and sour with sinning, innocent mind, and May-Day in girl and boy, most, O maid's child, thy choice and worthy the winning.
He was a born loser, accident-prone too, never won the lottery, married a girl who couldn't cook, broke his leg the day before the wedding and forgot the ring. He was the kind who ended up behind a post in almost any auditorium. Planes he was booked to fly on were delayed by engine trouble with sickening regularity. His holidays at the beach were almost always ruined by rain. All his apples turned out wormy. His letters came back marked, moved, left no address. And it was his car that was cited for speeding from among a flock of others going 60 in a 55-mile zone. So it was a real shocker when he found himself elected, chosen by grace for salvation, felt the exhilaration of an undeserved and wholly unexpected joy, and tasted, for the first time, the glory of being on the winning side.
Now, my co-mates and brothers in exile, not old custom made this life more sweet than that of painted pomp? Are not these woods more free from peril than the envious court? Here we feel but the penalty of Adam, the season's difference, as the icy fang and churlish chiding of the winter's wind, which, when it bites and blows upon my body, even till I shrink with cold, I smile and say, this is no flattery. These are counsellors that feelingly persuade me what I am. Sweet are the uses of adversity, which, like the toad, ugly and venomous, wears yet a precious jewel in his head. And this our life, exempt from public haunt, finds tongues in trees, books in the running brooks, sermons in stones, and good in everything. I would not change it.
I stayed with her when I was 6, then went to live elsewhere when I was 8 years old. For ages I remembered her faint scent of lavender, the way she'd never scold, no matter what I'd done, and most of all, the way her smile seemed somehow to enfold my whole world like a warm, protective world. I knew that I was safe when she was near. She was so tall, so wide, so large, she would stand mountainous between me and my fear, yet oh so gentle, and she understood every hope and dream I ever had. She praised me lavishly when I was good, but never punished me when I was bad. Years later, war broke out and I became a soldier and was wounded while in France. Back home in hospital, still very lame, I realised suddenly that circumstance had brought me close to that small town where she was living still, and so I seized the chance to write and ask if she would visit me. She came, and I still vividly recall the shock that I received when she appeared that dark, cold day. Huge Granny was so small, a tiny, frail old lady. It was weird. She hobbled through the ward to where I lay and drew quite close and, hesitating, peered. And then she smiled, and love lit up the day.
Can I see another's woe and not be in sorrow too? Can I see another's grief and not seek for kind relief? Can I see a falling tear and not feel my sorrow's share? Can a father see his child weep, nor be with sorrow filled? Can a mother sit and hear an infant groan, an infant fear? No, no, never can it be. Never, never can it be. And can he, who smiles on all, hear the wren with sorrows small, hear the small bird's grief and care, hear the woes that infants bear, and not sit beside the nest, pouring pity in their breast, and not sit the cradle near, weeping tear on infant's tear, and not sit both night and day, wiping all our tears away? Oh no, never can it be, never, never can it be. He doth give his joy to all, he becomes an infant small, he becomes a man of woe, he doth feel the sorrow too. Think not that thou canst sigh a sigh, and thy Maker is not by. Think not thou canst weep a tear, and thy Maker is not near. Oh, he gives to us his joy, that our grief he may destroy. Till our grief is fled and gone, he doth sit by us and moan.
When to the sessions of sweet, silent thought I summon up remembrance of things past, I sigh the lack of many a thing I sought, and with old woes new wail my dear time's waste. Then can I drown an eye, unused to flow, for precious friends, hid in death's dateless night, and weep afresh love's long since cancelled woe, and moan the expense of many a vanished sight. Then can I grieve at grievances foregone, and heavily from woe to woe tell all the sad account of fore-bemoaned moan, which I knew pay, as if not paid before. But if the while I think on thee, dear friend, all losses are restored, and sorrows end.
Here are some of the neighbours coming from the church my son is building. It's getting on so nicely. Good evening, neighbours. Is it nearly done?
It'll never be done.
There'll be no church.
Never be finished? Oh, tush and nonsense. What creatures men are. You're up to the roof.
Up to the roof we may be, but we'll get no further. The king post has beaten us.
You can't be beaten by a piece of timber. It isn't princely in a man to be beaten by a piece of timber. Be ashamed of yourselves.
The work was almost done, and then someone suddenly shouted, "The king post has swung out of position." For days we laboured at it, laboured and prayed, but nothing will make it go into place. We're not knowledgeable men with these things. It's not our work, and a church isn't like a little cottage. There's no hope for it, even if we go on trying till we're white-headed.
But Cuthman, he thinks of nothing but how the building grows. Nothing but of the day when it will be done. Where is he?
We couldn't get him away. For days he has tugged and tussled with it, with the blood in his face and the veins pushing in his head. He smooths the stone with his hand as though it were in a fever and sleepless. And then he stands heavily in the aisle with his misery staring to the east.
Poor Cuthman. Poor sweet son. On our journey here it was ahead of him like riches. And every moment he can, he has run to it as though he had heaven on his shoulders.
Here is the boy.
Cuthman, what's happened to you? Son, what's the matter?
The king post is in place again. The church will be finished.
But the neighbours said there was no one with you. You were alone.
I was alone by the unattended pillar, mourning the bereaved heir that lay so quiet between walls, hungry for hammer blows and the momentous hive that once was there. And when I prayed, my voice slid to the ground like a crushed pediment. There was a demolition written over the walls, and dogs rummaged in the foundations, and picnic parties laughed on the heap of stone. But gradually I was aware of someone in the doorway, and I turned my eyes that way and saw, carved out of sunlight, a man who stood watching me, so still that there was not other such stillness anywhere on the earth, so still that the air seemed to leap at his side. He came towards me, and the sun flooded its banks and flowed across the shadow. He asked me why I stood alone. His voice hovered on memory like open wings and drew itself up in a chine of silence as though it had long time lain in a vein of gold. I told him, It's the king post. He stretched his hand upon it, and at his touch it lifted to its place. There was no sound. I cried out. I cried at last, "Well, who are you?" I heard him say, "I was a carpenter."
Prayer is like watching for the kingfisher. All you can do is be where he is likely to appear, and wait. Often nothing much happens. There is space, silence, and expectancy. No visible sign, only the knowledge that he's been there and may come again. Seeing or not seeing cease to matter. You have been prepared. But when you've almost stopped expecting it, a flash of brightness gives encouragement.
Some days, although we cannot pray, a prayer utters itself. So, a woman will lift her head from the sieve of her hands and stare at the minims sung by a tree, a sudden gift. Some nights, although we are faithless, the truth enters our hearts, that small, familiar pain. Then a man will stand stock still, hearing his youth in the distant Latin chanting of a train. Pray for us now. Grade 1 piano scales console the lodger looking out across a Midlands town. Then dusk, and someone calls a child's name as though they named their loss. Darkness outside. Inside, the radio's prayer. Rockall, Malin, Dogger, Finisterre.
I come in the little things, saith the Lord, not borne on morning wings of majesty, but I have set my feet amidst the delicate and bladed wheat that springs triumphant in the furrowed sod. There do I dwell, in weakness and in power, not broken or divided, said our God. In your straight garden plot I come to flower, above your porch my vine, meek, fruitful, doth entwine, waits at the threshold, love's appointed hour.
I come in the little things, saith the Lord, yea, on the glancing wings of eager birds, the soft and pattering feet of furred and gentle beasts. I come to meet your hard and wayward heart. In brown, bright eyes that peep from out the brake, I stand confessed on every nest where feathery patience is content to brood, and leaves her pleasure for the high emprise of motherhood. There does my Godhead rest.
I come in the little things, saith the Lord. My starry wings I do forsake, love's highway of humility to take. Meekly I fit my stature to your need. In beggar's part, about your gates I shall not cease to plead, as man, to speak with man, till by such art I shall achieve my immemorial plan.
Love bade me welcome, yet my soul drew back, guilty of dust and sin. But quick-eyed love, observing me grow slack from my first entrance in, drew nearer to me, sweetly questioning if I lacked anything. A guest, I answered, worthy to be here. Love said,
You shall be she.
I? The unkind? Ungrateful? Ah, my dear, I cannot look on thee. Love took my hand, and smiling did reply,
Who made the eyes but I?
Truth, Lord, but I have marred them. Let my shame go where it doth deserve.
And know you not,
Says Love,
who bore the blame? My dear, then I will serve. You must sit down
says Love,
and taste my meat.
so I did sit and eat.
The sky was low. The sounding rain was falling dense and dark, and Noah's sons were standing at the window of the ark. The beasts were in, but Japhet said,
I see one creature more, belated and unmated, there come knocking at the door.
Well, let him knock. Or let him drown, learn to swim. We're overcrowded as it is. We've got no room for him.
And yet he knocks. How terribly he knocks. His feet are hard as horn, but oh, the air that comes from it is sweet.
Now hush. You'll waken Dad, and once he comes to see what's at the door, it's sure to mean more work for you and me.
Noah's voice came roaring from the darkness down below.
Some animal is knocking. Take it in before we go.
Ham shouted back, and savagely he nudged the other two.
That's only Japhet, knocking down a brad nail in his shoe.
Boys, I hear a noise that's like a horse's hoof.
Why, that's the dreadful rain that drums upon the roof.
Noah tumbled up on deck, and out he put his head. His face went grey, his knees were loosed, he tore his beard and said,
Look! Look! It would not wait! It turns away! It takes its flight! Fine work you've made of it, my sons, between you all tonight. Even if I could outrun it now, it would not turn again. Not now. Our great discourtesy has earned its high disdain. O noble and unmated beast, my sons were all unkind. In such a night, what stable and what manger will you find? O golden hoofs, O cataracts of mane, O nostrils wide with indignation, O the neck wave arched, the lovely pride. Oh, long shall be the furrows ploughed across the hearts of men before it comes to stable and to manger once again. And dark and crooked all the ways in which our race shall walk, and shrivelled all their manhood like a flower with a broken stalk. And all the world, oh, Ham, may curse the hour when you were born. Because of you, the ark must sail without the unicorn. Sometimes the mist overhangs my path, and blackening clouds about me cling. But oh, I have a magic way to turn the gloom to cheerful day. I softly sing. And if the way grows darker still, shadowed by sorrow's sombre wing, with glad defiance in my throat, I pierce the darkness with a note and sing, and sing. I brood not over the broken past, nor dread whatever time may bring. No nights are dark, no days are long, while in my heart there swells a song, and I can sing.
The circle of a girl's arms has changed the world, the round and sorrowful world, to a cradle for God. She has laid love in his cradle. In every cot Mary has laid her child. In each comes Christ. In each Christ comes to birth. Comes Christ from the mother's breast, as the bird from the sun, returning again to the tree he knows, and the nest, to last year's rifled nest. Into our hands Mary has given her child, heir to the world's tears, heir to the world's toil, heir to the world's scars, heir to the chill dawn over the ruin of wars. She has laid love in his cradle, answering for us all, be it done unto me. The child in the wooden bed, the light in the dark house, the life in the failing soul, the host in the priest's hands, the seed in the hard earth, the man who is a child again, quiet in the burial bands, waiting his birth. Mary, Mother of God, we are the poor soul and the dry dust. We are hard with a cold frost. Be warmth to the world, be the thaw, warm on the cold frost. Be the thaw that melts, that the tender shoot of Christ, piercing the hard heart, flower to a spring in us. Be hands that are rocking the world to a kind rhythm of love, that the incoherence of war and the chaos of our unrest be soothed to a lullaby, and the round and sorrowful world in your hands, the cradle of God.
He of his gentleness, fasting and hungering, walked in the wilderness. Soft words of grace he spoke unto lost desert folk that listened, wondering. He heard the bitten call from ruined palace wall, answered him brotherly. He held communion with the she-pelican of lonely piety. Basilisk, cockatrice, flocked to his homilies with mail of dread device, with monstrous barbed stings, with eager dragon eyes. Great bats on leathern wings, and old, blind, broken things, mean in their miseries. Then ever with him went of all his wanderings comrade, with ragged coat, gaunt ribs, poor innocent, bleeding foot, burning throat, the guileless young scapegoat. For 40 nights and days followed in Jesus' ways, sure guard behind him kept, tears like a lover wept.
There was no grave, grave enough to ground me, to mound me. I broke the balm, then slit the shroud wound round me that bound me. There was no death, dead enough to dull me, to cull me. I snapped the snake and then wand his war to lull me, to null me. There was no cross, cross enough to nill me, to still me. I hung as gold that bled, and bloomed a rose that rose and prized the tomb away from Satan's wilful doom. There was no cross, death, grave or room to hold me.
This is a hard land, a parched land of arid desert, scrub and ragged crag, where, by some ancient empty well, I came across red poppies nestling against the green of prickly pears, and a herd of black and tan goats relishing cyclamen that had teased a frail beauty from the dry fissures of a limestone wall. This, a hard land, stripped and starved, whose smooth white bones protrude bold as a beggar in the gritty sand, years after stony-hearted travellers passed by. Yet from its joints and marrow spring anemones, the iris and the purple thistle, and mallows blossoming soft as bright pelargoniums in the unrelenting sun. This is a hard land, so improbably, in spite of, that down miles of windswept barren hills lie the deep blue waters of the Dead Sea, turned wine when evening comes, from rose-red hues on Moab's mountainsides. Only here could the life of a dead man, cribbed in a blooded shroud, find a way out of a rock-hewn grave to breathe fresh dews of expectation on the withering of hope.
When Mary through the garden went, there was no sound of any bird, and yet, because the night was spent, the little grasses lightly stirred, the flowers awoke, the lilies heard. When Mary through the garden went, the dew lay still on flower and grass, the waving palms above her sent their fragrance out as she did pass. No light upon the branches was. When Mary through the garden went, her eyes for weeping long were dim, the grass beneath her footsteps bent, the solemn lilies white and slim, these also stood and wept for him. When Mary through the garden went, she sought within the garden ground one for whom her heart was rent, one who for her sake was bound, one who sought, and she was found.
Sunset and evening star, and one clear call for me. And may there be no moaning of the bar when I put out to sea, but such a tide as moving seems asleep, too full for sound and foam, when that which drew from out the boundless deep turns again home. Twilight and evening bell, and after that the dark. And may there be no sadness of farewell when I embark. For though from out our bourne of time and place the flood may bear me far, I hope to see my pilot face to face when I have crossed the bar.
Wilt thou forgive that sin where I begun, which was my sin, though it were done before? Wilt thou forgive that sin through which I run, and do run still, though still I do deplore? When thou hast done, thou hast not done, for I have more. Wilt thou forgive that sin which I have won others to sin, and made my sin their door? Wilt thou forgive that sin which I did shun a year or two, but wallowed in a score? When thou hast done, thou hast not done, for I have more. I have a sin of fear, that when I have spun my last thread, I shall perish on the shore. But swear by thyself, that at my death thy sun shall shine as he shines now, and heretofore. And, having done that, thou hast done. I fear no more.
Does the road wind uphill all the way?
Yes, to the very end.
Will the day's journey take the whole long day?
From morn to night, my friend.
But is there for the night a resting place?
A roof for when the slow, dark hours begin.
May not the darkness hide it from my face?
You cannot miss that inn.
Shall I meet other wayfarers at night?
Those who have gone before.
Then must I knock or call when just in sight?
They will not keep you standing at that door.
Shall I find comfort, travel sore and weak?
Of labour you shall find the sum.
Will there be beds for me and all who seek?
Yea, beds for all who come. My soul, there is a country afar beyond the stars, where stands a winged sentry, all skilful in the wars. There, above noise and danger, sweet peace sits, crowned with smiles, and one born in a manger commands the beauteous files. He is thy gracious friend, and, O my soul, awake, did in pure love descend to die here for thy sake. If thou canst get but thither, there grows the flower of peace, the rose that cannot wither, thy fortress and thy ease. Leave then thy foolish ranges, for none can these secure but one, who never changes, thy God, thy life, thy cure.